the adrenaline becomes quite addictive. There was certainly a point on my second tour where I was getting really frustrated that we weren't fighting enough. So I was actively trying to push things to try and find the Taliban and try and find contact. So my name's Andrew Fox. I'm a retired army officer. I served for 16 years in the British Army. And my current job is defence and Middle East researcher. I was one of those kids that was really brought up on war films and magazines and comics about the army, and that sparked an interest from a young age. I did cadets at school, absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed running around outside, making things go bang, pushing myself physically. I did feel the need to get a degree, so I went to university and did law, but that bored me to tears. I'd been in the reserves, the Territorial Army, throughout my time at university, and so joining the army was just the natural next step for me. So you could call it a lifelong ambition, if you will. I think the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan are probably the most accurate, that describe that kind of almost disorientation that happens when things go as noisy as they possibly can. Not that I'm in any way comparing my experience to D-Day, but it certainly captures that whole experience of 30 sets of eyeballs clicking onto you and saying, "What now, sir?" when the situation gets hairy. But in terms of those World War II films, they were very clearly made with a slightly different ethos in mind. Marvellous though they are, perhaps not as realistic as they might be. So Afghanistan came first, straight from training. So I finished the platoon commander's battle course in Brecon. And I was literally on a plane to Afghanistan within a week. I was 26. It was exciting. I feel slightly bad in some ways for the modern generation, because the way we described it was never going on operations was like training to be a Premier League footballer but never actually getting on the pitch. And of course that goes hand in hand with the fact that the generation now won't have the attrition of friends that my generation went through. There's a significant number of my peers and colleagues and friends who didn't come home alive, and that is definitely a blessing for the modern generation of the British Army, that we're not at war at the moment. But on a personal level, it was exciting. You get on a plane at RAF Brize Norton. It's an RAF jet for the first time. You are fully in your desert camouflage at the time. You land in Kandahar. Even the name itself, I think, has a slightly romantic ring to it. It's just the sound of the word Kandahar. There's dust everywhere. There's heat. There's body armor, and you get the sense that you're a part of a machine almost, the military war machine that you've signed up to. You can feel the pieces moving around you. Then you get the short hop to flight. It's a Hercules flight from Kandahar to Camp Bastion at the time. That was a Hercules that they let me sit in the cockpit. My father was RAF, so I pulled that card. So I got to see Afghanistan from the sky for the first time, landed in Bastion, and then I was straight forward to Gereshk, and straight into a battle group, combined arms assault. So I was attached to Mercian, which wasn't my regiment, but I was attached to them for Operation Herrick 6. And the first time rounds came over my head, I had troops in front of me, so I couldn't return fire. So I literally just hit the deck and started trying to dig into the soil as deeply as I could, because there wasn't a great deal I could really do. And I wasn't entirely sure if I'd done the right thing at that point, but I looked up and there was a colour sergeant, so a pretty senior non-commissioned officer about 3 or 4 metres away from me, who was doing exactly the same thing. So I felt pretty reassured. And he gave me a big grin as we were both lying there on the deck with rounds flying over our head. So the adrenaline was enormous. There's definitely fear. Anyone who says that being shot at isn't scary is lying to you. But it was, the drills came naturally. I'd just finished training. I was about as sharp as I could have been in terms of the right thing to do at the right time. And it felt I felt trained for it. I felt prepared. There was one incident where we were broadly quite pinned down. The Taliban had got a machine gun onto us, and we couldn't really go left or right. And company headquarters had to call for an airstrike to get us out of the danger there. And it was an A-10, the big tank buster. It's a plane that's basically designed around the cannon on the front. And it came in and cleared through the tree line that was from where the enemy were firing. It was just this insane noise, like thunder from the sky. And then everything went quiet, because they'd taken care of the enemy for us. But certainly that moment of being pinned down and unable to move or really do anything, that feeling of powerlessness was probably the scariest thing on that tour. My second tour was platoon commanding again, up in Musakala, and that was a pretty easy tour actually. There wasn't a huge amount happened. I think we got ambushed once as a company and had to call for some mortar fire to get us out of the danger, but it wasn't a kinetic tour as dangerous as many other people went through. It was fairly relaxed in that sense. My third tour though was really exciting. I was by pure luck attached to the US Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, and essentially every time one of their A teams went out on a mission doing sort of kill or capture strike missions, I got to go with them. So we were flying in at night, blowing in the doors of compounds and clearing through them, which was certainly an experience and certainly the highlight of my time in Afghanistan. The adrenaline becomes quite addictive. There was certainly a point on my second tour where I was getting really frustrated that we weren't fighting enough. So I was actively trying to push things to try and find the Taliban and try and find contact, which in hindsight probably wasn't the most balanced or sensible thing to do. But yeah, it was the addiction of the adrenaline and the fact that you deeply miss that rush when you get back, because there's nothing that really comes close to it. I've skydived, I've scuba dived, I've hiked some pretty big mountains. I've been, zip lining or whatever it might be. Anything that gives you a rush doesn't really come close to that life or death adrenaline, which isn't particularly healthy, but it's just your body's natural response to get you through a situation that's, literally imminently life-threatening. So I'd had a brush with PTSD after my third tour. It was a bit of sleeplessness, it was a bit of hyper-alertness, with helicopters particularly. The Chinooks and the Apaches that used to fly over regularly used to send my adrenaline spiking a little bit. And I was a bit irascible, a bit angry about things. But a very small amount of treatment kind of made that go away. But there was an incident in Kenya in 2017 where my company, as I was the company commander, were inadvertently, shall we say, blown up in a training accident, and that sent me on a real spiral that led to medical retirement. And that was a full suite of symptoms for PTSD. So sleeplessness, and when I could sleep, it would be nightmares of blood. There was incredible depression and anxiety, and it was just a deeply unpleasant time where I wasn't functioning particularly well as a human being because of what was going on. And since then, I've had a huge amount of treatment. The Army were brilliantly supportive. My boss, Chris Davis, was just the best guy in the world to have had me under his command at that time. He took care of me really well. And as I said, the Army then re-employed me, so I didn't feel like I'd completely lost everything, which is certainly something I think people with PTSD who do get discharged could find makes matters worse for them. But I'm going to be grateful to the Army forever for the way they helped me sort of progress and get through it. I think it's important to note that being in the Army actually gives you less chance of having PTSD than the normal population. There are things the Army does, like provide a strong ethos and a strong camaraderie, a strong support mechanism that actually psychologically makes you less likely to get PTSD, particularly at the moment because we're not on combat operations. But veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan are clearly vulnerable. And the hardest thing, I think, is firstly recognising that something's wrong, and then secondly, asking for and getting help. There's still a stigma attached to it that can make it really difficult to actually put your hand up and say, I need some help to get through this. But the help is there if you can reach that point, or if someone around you can help you reach that point where you can ask for help. And I think the really important thing to do is reframe it as an injury. If you broke your leg, you would go to the doctor, you would get treatment, you would get physiotherapy afterwards, you'd get that to get you back to where you were before. And PTSD is just the same. It's a mental injury. You can get help, you can get treatment, and you can recover to live a full and happy life away from those away from those symptoms that are so debilitating.